You are listening to selfdiscoverymedia.com, where illumination and inspiration is but a click away. With so many genre topics for you on everything that you need to know in life. We celebrate and share the people who have taken the journey before you and who are now here to serve you with their wisdom and their knowledge. The next show coming up is... Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to selfdiscoverymedia.com. I'm your host, Sara Troy, and this is Building Your Business with Zoe Routh from Australia. It's all about the people stuff. You know, as people, we go and do stuff, we say stuff, we think stuff, and it doesn't always kind of really work for us. And I think looking at the people stuff and how we can actually look at life more simply, in a more fun, adventurous way while you're learning. As she says, why smart people do dumb things, the power of perspective and leadership, loyalty, and that four devils of people stuff. So why do we do the dumb things? Where does that come from? Is it past programming? What kind of leadership are we? And because don't forget, you are the leader that is leading everybody else. Where's the loyalty to yourself and your calling and your mission? And what are those four devils of people stuff that gets in our way? So this is a lady who's taken the journey in life. She's been 30 years doing this kind of work, building it up so that it's something that now serves you. She's a cancer survivor. She gets out there and enjoys life tremendously. She loves nature and she just gets on with it and doesn't get so stuck in the people stuff. Please do share, Zoe, because we all get stuck in people stuff.
We all do. It's certainly the biggest challenge that every leader has, is in dealing with the people stuff. So I'm delighted to be here. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share a little bit of what I know and to explore this topic a bit further with you, Sara.
Yes, the four devils. Okay, I mean, it's such a great, I'm sure there's more than four, but what are those key four devils that, get in our way? Because we are the people that get in our own way. It's not, we love to blame everything else, but it really is our perspective and our attitudes that get in the way, isn't it?
Yeah. So the four devils come from a combination of four things. So when it comes to the people stuff that's problematic, we often look to behavior as one of the symptoms or presenting issues from the people stuff. Underneath it, we have emotions that create a bunch of problems and attitudes around that, as well as beliefs. So it's kind of a combination of those four things that create problematic stuff when we're dealing with people. I think it's not so much, well, I guess programming has a little bit to do with that. It's more how we respond to the different contexts. And underneath all the problematic behavior and presenting symptoms is fear. It's fear of isolation, it's fear of rejection, it's all these basic human issues that cause us to get derailed. And so what happens is that all people, I believe, are fundamentally good and they don't want to cause problems at work. They want to show up and they want to make a contribution. And something has disturbed their ethos, and these four elements come to the foray and they create issues. So you have someone show up and they're a bit of a storm driver. So their emotions and their beliefs stir up and they create this kind of rage, and they cause drama around them. That's a bit of a storm driver. They create and drag people into them, which is into their issues, and they kind of recruit fellow whingers, if you like. I love that word in Australia, whinger. It's such a good one. And then we have the people so that's a little bit different than the fire starter, who has got an attitude and a belief, and they want to actually take down the leadership team, if you like, or the organization as a whole, because they're so fundamentally enraged with what's going on. And they will seed seeds of discontent and trying to upend everything. So that's a pretty problematic behavior that leaders often deal with.
The shoot steerers, as we would call them.
That's a very straightforward way of describing that. And then you have the water bombers. And the water bombers are those those of us who get really emotional at work, so much so that their emotions are driving all of their interactions, and they don't seem to be able to manage or monitor them at all. And so they show up and water bomb everybody with their emotional wake, and it causes it's distressing for others around them because they're not quite sure how to handle this person. And in fact, I was in a meeting the other day where I started off the meeting because we were talking about people stuff. I said, what's the kind of behavior that drives you nuts? And one of the women said, people who are unpredictable and inconsistent. So one day they're happy and next day they're like full of woe. So these are kind of the four devils that I see happening in workplaces. But if you unpick it a little bit, it's a lot more of a human driver. And I think compassion can help bend some of the issues there.
Yes. I mean, really kind of common denominator, a lot of those things is our emotions, isn't it? And the inability to kind of handle our emotions. And we seem to be imposing our emotions on other people. And a lot of the time to fix one's problem or as you said, I'm angry or this or that, I've got to get somebody else to be angry as well. We love to share emotions if they're productive, if there's something that's very positive, but when they become something that is disruptive, and then there's a ripple effect of that disruption triggering all those other perspectives. And that's when you just end up with kind of a tornado of stuff going on and no productivity at all.
That's absolutely right. And I think it comes down to a lot of us have not been taught or learned how to feel our emotions fully and be able to experience them without having them be in the driver's seat. So when I do work with people around their deep emotional awareness and intelligence, I talk about this idea of getting our emotions out of the driver's seat and putting them in the passenger seat. I think it's a mistake to think that we need to control our emotions. We need to manage them. And I think a lot of people think that I just need to not feel things and I need to be this equilibrium. And that's not the natural state of humanity anyway. We always go up and down, but it's how we experience them. I think those of us who bring our negative emotions and let them take over haven't yet learned how to observe ourselves. And it's a key emotional intelligence skill is to be able to go, oh, I'm experiencing frustration right now. Instead of embodying the emotion and letting it become who we are. Even our language is problematic. I am frustrated. So we become the emotion of frustration instead of, I have frustration in me right now. And when we do that tiny little shift actually disperses the energy a little bit and gets it out of our body and off to the side so that we can remain with our best selves in the driver's seat. The best selves that is wise and compassionate and peaceful, as opposed to this volatile entity of our emotional world. So my wish for the world is that we learn how to witness and experience our emotions and honor them, because it is part of the fulsomeness of life that we experience the whole gamut of grief and joy, frustration and excitement, and that we can weave between them without being attached to any of them.
I mean, our emotions are there to indicate what's going on or how we feel about something. But one of the problems is as you say, you put the emotions in the driver's seat and we become emotional. And I think it's what's causing this emotion. Be more inquiring. What's causing this? Do I really need to take this on? Is this somebody else's emotion that is filtering through and triggering something in me? And I think we're inclined to jump in to an emotion without really actually understanding, has it got anything to do with me, or is this an old trigger that's come up? Can I just look at it and go, really, I don't need you today. I acknowledge you, I see you, bye-bye. But we are inclined to jump in at the deep end before realizing what we're jumping into.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think you nailed it there, that self-inquiry and being curious about what is the information that our emotions are presenting to us and what it has to offer is one of the skills of of advanced emotional intelligence. And like, oh, hang on a minute, what's the story behind this? Because all emotions are driven by story, whether we are consciously aware of them or not. It's just accumulation of experiences that we've put meaning on, and we can put new meaning on any experience and take lessons from it. So learning how to manage the energy of emotions is a key people stuff skill. And then, as you pointed out, the other one, or the next one, is being able to look objectively at it, or with curiosity and self-compassion too, about, oh, well, here's this pattern yet again.
Yes.
What's it bringing up for me today?
Mhm. And what's triggering it too? Because suddenly you can
Yeah.
find yourself feeling anxious or stressed or this or that and go, okay, I wasn't feeling like that a moment ago. What's triggering this? What's going on that this has switched this on? And again, how am I going to manage it? Because I think one of the biggest problems, especially in the workplace, actually anywhere, is that we love to, as I said, impose our emotions, impose how we're feeling on other people. And a lot of the time, because we want other people to fix the problem. But we've created that problem, or the problem is around us and we have mismanaged it. And so we end up then blaming someone for it rather than taking ownership for it ourselves.
Yeah, I love that one. So I love, yeah, triggers are an interesting one. It's like
Mhm.
sometimes we don't even know what the triggers are until they happen. It's like, wow, I can't believe that comment just caused me to
Yes.
have this volcanic eruption inside myself. That's interesting.
Hmm.
Um, and then trying to blame others, I think, is an interesting reaction as well. I was working with a gentleman, just started working with him. He's a partner in a major organization. And the conversation said, I've been given some feedback that I'm a little bit too harsh and stern, he said with a harsh and stern voice. And I need to change that, I guess. But I said, well, what do you really want? He goes, I would just want people to show up and do their job.
Yeah, where's
Mm.
the invitation?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And then he said, I said, what questions do you have? And he said, how does this work? How are we going to make sure that we get results? I'm like, well, a lot of it depends on you. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, your ability to take on feedback and to be self-examining is pretty critical to that. And I think the penny dropped for him when he realized, like, oh, I have
Mm,
been blaming everybody else for the situation. And just that comment, I want everybody else to sort their stuff out so that I can carry on, is a way of deflecting and objectifying his
yeah,
own emotional frustration and blaming everyone else around him for it. And I think when we start as leaders to press pause on that and go, if we're blaming everyone else, we're not really looking at our contribution, because we are all
right,
co-creators in our experience. And it's very easy to put blame elsewhere and not to take responsibility and
right.
fall into that state of victimhood. And it's way more powerful the minute that we realize that we are co-creators and that we can do something different and create something different. It's an interesting, I like this idea, or this place in our experience when we sit on the cusp of responsibility and
Hmm.
our sudden awareness hits there where we go, oh, I'm responsible. And that's at once terrifying. And
Yes.
then if we can move into the proactive space, get really excited by that, going, oh, I am responsible, so I can
Hmm.
create whatever. And
I'm going to pause that a second.
oh, sorry, yes, I'm
Responsible.
getting
No, no, no,
excited.
no, no, no. Pause, create.
Yeah.
When you pause and you can create something, when you're not demanding, you are inviting creation. I just wanted those two to be side by side there.
That's a wonderful insight. When you're not demanding, you allow space
Yeah.
for creation. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's lovely. And it resonates a lot with what one of my mentors, Cindy Wigglesworth, if you're not familiar with her work, has written a book called The 21 Skills of Spiritual Intelligence, which is all about advanced emotional
Hmm.
intelligence. And her work informs a lot of my work. And she talks about the pause as doing spiritual weightlifting, so that
Yes,
when you
yes.
have, I love this one, right? So it's like the pause, don't try and push everything, allow for that
Yes.
co-creation and creativity piece. And the pause is the big spiritual weightlifting tool, because when you pause, you allow that space for
Mm.
compassion, compassion for self and compassion for others. And you can choose a better response. Or if you're doing creative piece, allow for a creative solution to emerge.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't demand creativity. I always say that these shows that we do are inspiration for invitation. When you inspire people, you're inviting them to want to participate, to want to look at
Mm.
their own lives and how can I apply this in my own life. And back quickly to that blame thing. While you're pointing a finger, there's three pointing back at you.
Yeah.
And we got to remember everything is a reflection of ourselves. So if we're getting attitude back at us, it is just a response to what we've
Yeah.
been dishing out. So if we're not getting what we want back, maybe we need to change the way we're giving. because in the giving and the inspiration, that is where you incite the creativity. And I think it's when you also open the door that it's not directed at this one or that one, but that it's an open door policy. Anybody can put their creative thoughts forward, and everybody will be treated with the same respect. And I think that then becomes the invitation, isn't it?
I love that. So yes, it's about everyone's ideas are welcome, and that is how you invite, or that's how you demonstrate respect and allow creativity to occur. I would add one other piece into that: inspiration, the invitation for inspiration, and then you add a big dose of perspiration into the mix, because I think
yes. Yes. Yeah, that definitely has bucket loads of it to go along with it.
Yeah, that's right. Elizabeth Gilbert wrote a beautiful book called Big Magic, which is all about the creative process. And she says, I think for creatives, when you're working alone, which is different to when you're working with others, the idea that you sit and you allow inspiration to occur happens occasionally. And she said the work of the artist is often that, and sitting down and pushing through those blocks and just doing the work.
Yes.
And if you wait for the muse to land upon your shoulder, then you'll be waiting a long time. It's delightful when it happens, when those little thought fishes swim past and you go, oh, I'll have that one. And you can channel it into your work. And then often the time there's no thought fishes at all. And it's like, okay, I've got my blank page. I've got my empty screen. Off we go. And that sort of elbow grease. And any creative knows that putting the work into the world is the work.
Yes.
And yet, but I think where I sense you're coming from, though, is the energy behind that. You can do it with dread, or you can do it with delight. And I think when you have that pause invitation piece, it's the delight that drives the perspiration, which makes the labor a labor of love instead of a labor of angst.
Well, I mean, you talk about, your life is about fun and adventure. And if we look upon our life as an adventure, I certainly do not want to have a manual to tell me which next step I need. I kind of did that. I did what I call the society's expectations of me. And I just, every time they talk about the sweat, I just couldn't do it. It wasn't me. And it took a long time for me to realize, no, go and walk your own path. You have no idea where you're going, but you do know how to put one foot in front of the other. Be willing to explore and allow that inspiration to come to you, and understand that every person you meet along the way is an ingredient in the dish. And I think we so much want direction and the manual. Well, how should I do it? What should I do? What's the next step? That we don't realize those are just tools in our backpack. It's not something that you okay, now I've got to step to the right or step to the left. No, it's just walk forward and know how to tap into your senses and be aware of what comes to you, because that's the opportunity. And what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, I like that, as the direction being tools and frameworks. And I think that's a really insightful observation, is that if you're trying to, you see this a lot in business, where people just want the recipe. Just tell me what I need to do next to take me out of this doubt. And it's such a hard message to say, well, I don't have the answers for you. I have a couple of playbooks you can play with. And I think that's the delightful aspect of it. And if you take that lightness to it, you will see more possibilities, opposed to trying to solve a problem. And yet it's such a difficult place to be, because if you have real world challenges, like needing to pay the bills, and there are some real world consequences to not solving the problem, that can hamper the creative allowing, I think. I'm not sure. Do you agree with that? Or do you think
anxiety kills creativity. Anxiety leads to stress. Stress is the number one killer right now, because it brings about all the other dis-ease and the lack of productivity, because we get stuck. We literally freeze, in that anxiety. And so the more you worry about something, the less productive you're going to be. But when you do have, oh gosh, the rent is due, or the mortgage is due, or I've got to put food on the table, and nothing is happening, of course you're going to get anxious about it. But it's kind of, more that kind of the devil's claws coming out there. It's like, are you going to give in to that emotion, Or
Mm.
are you going to find those tools where you can take 5, take a deep breath, and look at, well, what step can I take forward right now? I don't need to take a leap, but what step forward can I take right now? And then I can gather a momentum as I go. But we get so stuck in that, oh my God, that we freeze.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with that. And I was just, as you were talking, going back to one of my darkest moments, which is going through cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and where, you know, a lot of things were on the line. And
Yes.
and I think there's a lot of people who have similar kind of very, very confronting experiences where you get to the bottom, whether it's your rock bottom or pretty darn close. You sit in that space and go, what really matters? And what do I have control over? And there's so many factors over which you don't have control. And the only space to move forward is that little, well, I can control my thoughts. I can control my focus. I can take deep breaths, and I can start to allow appreciation of the moment, allow appreciation of the beauty. And in that deepest despair, you can find that sense of ease. And
Mm-hmm.
in that sense of ease, it's when you allow the disease to go away. And in the ease, you can start to rest. And in
Yeah.
the ease, you can start to replenish. And even though when I was going through cancer, I couldn't work. So there was no money coming in.
Mm-hmm.
I had a roof over my head still. I had a little bit of money in the bank still. I went backward in my business, but I went forward in my life. And
Yeah.
it's such
Yeah.
a
Oh.
wonderful experience
No,
through
no,
the
no,
end.
no. Pause. We're pausing again. You went backwards in your business, but you went forward in your life. That
Mm.
is definitely a moment for pause, because I call that the redirect.
It was definitely a redirect experience. That's for sure. Yeah, it was
And look how
a
much
lot.
strength and courage that you discovered
Yeah, you know
about
what?
yourself, you know?
Mm. And I think the realization of that didn't come for many years later. And I think it's an interesting thing that we do as humans is that we go through these extraordinary experiences, whether it's a painful one or a pleasurable one. And because we've just gone through them, we go, oh, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
just discount all these miracles. And I think that's a weird thing that we do. I was talking to a friend about that recently. Now it's like we were discussing our successes in business. And I said, you know, we just share these amazing stuff, you know, 5 years ago would be inconceivable.
Excuse me.
And kind of just being so blasé about it.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? And she goes, well, I think we acclimatize. We acclimatize to this new levels of joy or new levels of pain. And I think if we forget to explore and appreciate the miracles, we miss out on savoring those extraordinary moments in our worlds, because no matter what's happening in our life and business, it is extraordinary. And I think that was the gift of cancer for me,
Yes.
is being able to every day see this extraordinary miracle of the universe around me, and in the leaves on the trees, and in the chickens in my yard, and the ants crawling around, and in the blue sky, and going, wow, holy cow, this is just abundance and beauty and everything. And I think remembering that is the trick. I think you have the lesson, but you got to keep trying to keep the lesson with me hasn't always been the easiest thing.
No, because we, as you said, sometimes we become, I think maybe even a little blasé about it. But you know, it's everybody I've ever interviewed that has had what I've, you know, call the rock bottom or the cosmic 2x4, you know, something they've had to face, you know, as you said, beautifully said, you went backwards in your business, but forward in your life. Every single one of them in going forward in their life has said, I really discovered my instrument,
Mm.
what my calling is, what my meaningful purpose is. And because of what I went through, I am so much more empowered now to do what I need to do in every aspect of my life. So that really is the gift that you're talking about, isn't it? That opening up and awareness to everything that you can do.
I wish it was more. It was like the lightning bolt, that the way that you describe it. It was definitely
Well, it
not
does have,
that.
you know, I know, maybe a trickle effect, perhaps a little light bulb coming on here and there.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's more of like an unfolding, like
Mm-hmm.
petals of a flower opening a little bit by little bit. Um, and because the dramatic ta-da, I know everything, is way more exciting than the reality of just unfurling and unpeeling and opening to that. And yes, I agree with you that these kinds of experiences, if we do the work of interrogating, if we do the work of
Mm.
allowing, if we do the work of healing, then they become useful for us. And I think they become the foundations on which we can then keep creating and
Mm.
keep contributing and keep honoring this gift of life. But yeah, it's definitely a slower, gentler process
Mm.
than the lightning bolts.
And not, but it's also, it's not sweating the small stuff, because we're inclined to sweat the small stuff. Oh, you said what? Hackles are up, and it's like, oh, no, forget it. I'm not taking it on. Because I think when you've gone through something, it puts things into priority. It puts things into perspective more. And, and then it just becomes something that's even more. I'm pausing here for a second. I love the fact that you call it people stuff. It's very simple. We've all got stuff that we need to deal with, and we all react somewhere along the line, and we've all got to catch ourselves and learn how to manage our emotions. But how do you help people? What do you take people down? What's your program or your system?
Well, people stuff is the overarching, I guess, umbrella for some of the programs that I do work with. I do team stuff in the people stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really about getting teams to understand each other's drivers. So in that program, we look at people's behavior, preference, and patterns. So we do a bit of people map reading. We do emotional intelligence. So we look at how people honor and witness and manage their emotions. And we also look at people's beliefs, which can get in the way of smart people doing dumb things, or can
Mm-hmm.
cause smart people to do
Yeah.
dumb things. So unpicking a little bit of that bias. So the way that I work with people is that we unpack. So we do some training, we do some on-the-job training, on-the-job exploration and activities to help them consolidate and work through those skills. The leadership stuff program I do is really exploring how leaders lead change, lead culture, lead strategy, and lead discussion. So it's about bringing their cognitive and emotional skills into the people stuff on a broader scale. And then the Your Stuff program is all about dealing one-on-one with the executives. And that's really exploring their leadership thinking, being, and doing. How are they showing up? How are they thinking? How are they communicating? And exploring their energy as well. So the fundamentals of the way that I do people stuff is that deep self-mastery piece, which came and emerged through my cancer experience, about how do we deal with ourselves so that we don't just neglect ourselves. So that's a little bit of a capsule of how I work with individuals and teams. And then occasionally I get to speak at different conferences and share these ideas more broadly.
It's so needed today. I mean, we've got caught up with this word leadership, and we don't realize we're leaders in our own lives. And that everything we put out is a reflection of who we really are. So we need to be really mindful, and I think heartful, of how we present ourselves, and bring the heart, the soul, and the spirit into the equation as well. And to realize that that leadership is one where we do inspire, and that we do allow and invite, collaboration, a cohesiveness. And I think we've got stuck in maybe reflective of what's going on in the world, that leadership has become almost dictatorship and demandingship. And we know that that doesn't invite anyone, that repels people. But it's still kind of an old paradigm, isn't it? That kind of thought, I'm leader, what I say goes. And that isn't the way we do business anymore, is it? The leadership is the one that inspires people to contribute to the greater project, the greater good.
Yes. So the command and control aspect of leadership, it harks back to a different age where it was useful and effective in that context. We see elements of it being pulled back into on the global stage. And I think the reason that that's happening is because there's a certain attraction to being told what to do. There's a sense of security and safety in that one-way communication style. And I think that's one of the reasons why we see the rise of different political leaders who are taking that command and control hero style leadership. And yet at the same time, there's a developmental force that is drawing us forward into a different way of being, which galvanizes the creative power and energy and and talent of all people all of us are leaders in different contexts. You don't necessarily need authority to be a leader, and certainly not in our own lives. And the pull towards collaboration and interconnectivity is being driven by our evolving context of being a global civilization and the technology platforms that allow us to be so interconnected. There is now becoming more of a compulsion and a calling and a need to be more interactive and collaborative and create the space that way. I think it's an interesting challenge for us as a society to be able to do the dance between the old paradigm and the new one. Because there's a lot of people who are not yet ready to do the collaboration piece. They don't feel safe enough in their current context to be able to leap into that. And I think you do need some grounding in who you are and where you are in order to be able to be effective in that new style. And all the kids, young adults who are coming into the workplace now, I don't know about you, but anybody under 30 feels like a kid to me. I'm just kidding.
Hey, at my age, everybody is a kid.
Yeah. So these wonderful global citizen new employees have a very different sense of the world.
Yeah.
They've experienced it differently, and they want to collaborate. They want to contribute straight out of the gates. And this is a wonderful creative force that we have an opportunity to leverage and to build on. And I think that kind of approach is going to solve a lot of our global problems, as well as our national problems and our business problems, because none of us is as smart as all of us. And
Right.
I think we can create well in that space.
Yeah, I say that our activism has now become our actionism. And, that we are really, instead of talking about it, more wanting to do something about it, acting on it. And what we see with, under 30s, they actually are more in action. But I also find that they really want to simplify things, kind of go back to basics, bring an awful lot of kind of nature into the way they look at life, and understand that everything has a purpose, and everything there is. If you just look at nature, the systems are absolutely incredible. And if we kind of tapped into that, we would actually see that there are some natural processes that work. And we've come along kind of thinking we're more intelligent or more superior, and it's going to be done our way. And history has shown us that perhaps that wasn't working. So that integration with nature, which, because I know you're very involved in that, you're very involved in the outdoors, that it really comes into play the way we see things and the way we respect and value things, but also the way that we then go and do things in our own lives.
That systems thinking that you refer to, which nature presents to us as a great learning opportunity, is definitely a hallmark of advanced leadership thinking. And we have to go through these different stages of being able to problem solve in a linear way before we can move to more complexity. And I think it parallels the pull back to command and control. So command and control is all about linear problem solving, and it's reassuring because this is the way, it's black and white. The reality of the world and of our context is that no, we actually operate in very complex and dynamic and ever evolving systems like nature. And the more we're able to play, and it is a sense of needing to play in that dynamic environment, the better able we are going to be able to be responsive and lighter with it. And I agree with you. The newer generations, they want to, it's a great paradox. Let's simplify in the complexity. And so a lot of them they're participating in this global context, and then they're simplifying their lives. The movement to minimalism is rife amongst younger people. A lot of them are not buying cars, not buying houses. They're going, what's the point? Self-driving cars will be here in a moment, and we can leverage that system, that connectivity, so that there is more prosperity. And this idea of hoarding is moving away, is let go of in these younger generations. The systems piece is a really useful one, and it takes a lot of centeredness to be able to explore that kind of dynamic, because it is destabilizing when you've come from a command and control black and white environment to look at complexity. That's incredibly frightening until you find the liberation that it offers. But it is a transition that is difficult to navigate at times.
And this is where the teamwork comes in. I'm a blueprinter. I see possibilities. And this could happen and that could happen. And I've got the whole building up, but I absolutely wouldn't know which brick or which wire goes where. I need, the constructor. And this is where the teamwork is good, because then each one of us has a strength, to apply to the vision. Somebody, I see this, oh yes, and we could do that, and this could happen, but okay, we run into this problem, but if you did it this way, and all of a sudden the whole team is inspired and involved because they've all been invited to participate. And rather than one leader kind of saying, no, it's going to be, it's like, well, what if? What if? And if we can, how can we? And you can throw out a million ideas, and it may be only 100 that actually work. But if you don't allow all of those ideas to be put out there, how are you going to know which 100 will work?
It requires of the leader, i.e. the person with authority, to let go of their ego.
Oh, yes, please do talk about ego. That's a huge one.
And ego, capital ego. So the idea of vanity, I guess, disappears a little bit. And what I see with leaders, as they start to redefine their role in the workplace. So instead of being the hero, which has a sense, that's how they get their sense of pride in being able to solve problems and dictate. We move away from that. And it's a difficult transition to then sit into the leader as co-creator. And the need to be recognized and appreciated as the solution finder has to dissolve. And our role and how we define ourselves in allowing the creative space for other geniuses to put forward their work, and not having the need to own the solution, which is a capital ego, is an important piece of maturity. And to delight in the co-creation of the group, the team, is a new stage of leadership maturity. And it's a selflessness, it's a service, which is quite different to being the solution in earlier stages. And it's quite a powerful transition to make, and it needs a lot of support to do that. And a lot of humbling self-reflection. So for example, a leader I was talking about earlier who says, what do you want? I want everybody to just fix themselves. It's quite humbling when you put the mirror up and go, well, you're causing some of the issues. Let's explore that. And it can be a painful process as well as an enlightening one.
Yeah, I mean, first, fix thyself. You are a reflection. So if there is discord out there, you have to look to yourself and your own leadership pattern, and what are you vibrating out to everyone. And where, I think it's also good for people to say, look, I'm going through something right now. I'm not going to have the answers, or I'm in a flux right now. And maybe you don't want to invite anyone to come in and do anything, just simply be support for you. But I think in a workplace, a lot of people are too scared to say, look, I'm going through something at home, because they don't want everybody piling in, or they don't want to be judged, or there's something that they're working out, but they just simply need, it's okay, I'm there when you need me. And if you can't be up to full speed right now, I understand. You've just taken that pressure off somebody, and you've allowed them to deal with what they need to deal with. And they're going to remember that. And when they come back, they're going to come back with that gratitude and full force again. So there's a lot of give and take that has to happen, isn't there?
There is. It's another polarity and paradox, I guess. Well, polarity rather than paradox, in that we need to allow the space for people to manage their own selves, and at the same time they need to deliver. So there's a to and froing, a push and pull around that. And the leader who sits in management or in relationship with the people to whom they are responsible has to weigh that up. And I agree with you. Like, I think leaders who serve with compassion do that better. And at the same time, if they don't do it that well, they can be taken for a ride. So that's sort of where the polarity can go off the mark a little bit. If you allow too much latitude and too much space, then they can be taken advantage of. And that's moving into some of the devils of people stuff, where things get out of balance and you need to pull it back. But in overarching, my recommendation, and it sits alongside yours, is that show up with compassion, be curious and supportive, and create that space where it's okay for people to say, I'm having a difficult time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think leaders need to learn how to do that, and they need to create the space for that. I was talking to different organization teams in different organizations where it's like it is not safe to discuss your personal stuff at work. It's
Right.
like you do get judged and you do get black labeled. So I think it's an it's not aspirational. Well, no, it is an aspirational thing that all workplaces should have that context that allows people to bring their whole selves to work and be able
Yes.
to explore
Yes.
and
If you want the best of them,
discuss.
yes, let them, don't let them come. I'm only giving you a 10% of me
Mm-hmm.
because the other 90% is, going to be judged. No, you want people to feel comfortable that they can bring all of themselves to the table.
Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
is a dicey one though, isn't it? Depending on the size of the company and.
That's right. Bigger companies have more absorption power than smaller businesses, where if you do have one player out of action, it does have a massive overload on everybody else around them, which I think makes it even more important to know each other well and to be able to be seamless in the support. Otherwise, it turns into resentment, and the whole culture can get undermined. I call those folks who complain about that tectonic splitters. So they're kind of like, they move the earth underneath the ground and they cause these craters to emerge because they sit and they whinge and they undermine and they termite hole, and all of a sudden the whole thing goes.
And quite honestly, I mean, it's perhaps don't employ those people. Let them go and work it out. Why am I unemployable? Maybe because you whinge too much. Again, that's that accountability, isn't it? That responsibility. What are you bringing to the table? And if it's a whole load of, well, that won't work. Well, I won't bother. Who needs the naysayer? If it's constructive criticism, well, you're going to run into that problem. Well, then that presents somebody looking for a solution. But if it's just like, no, not going to work, who needs them?
Yeah, the Eeyores of the world.
Yes.
Braying.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to know, like, is it a habitual pattern, or is it just a temporary one? So I was working with an architect, and he has a very small team. There's 5 of them. And he was discussing this ongoing issue with a staff member who was being secretive, and he was worried about the behavior and wondering if he was being taken advantage of. He was doing, doing personal stuff on work time. And finally, the leader said, hey, what's going on? Are you happy here? I think you don't like this particular work that you're doing. What if we move you to a different side of the business? And you can do that. And all your other personal projects, why don't we just bring them into the fold of the organization? And the turnaround was enormous.
Right.
And so that's like a good news story. So somebody who was a bit a bit of a tectonic splitter, or, disappearing into the woodwork kind of attitude, really it was because they didn't know how to express, or even knew that it was okay to say, I don't like this kind of work. I'd rather be doing that.
Right.
And so they were trying to solve their problem in a underhanded way instead of being open. And it took the leader to change his approach to invite and allow a conversation where they could create a different solution that brings people out. So I think this is an interesting one. It's easy to brand people with these labels, which is what I do in talking about 4 devils of people stuff. I think there are some personalities, particularly personality disorders, that are hardwired, but they're rare. And most of the time, this behavior problem is soft wiring. It's programming as opposed to hard wiring. And I think the technique in hiring is trying to figure out, it's like, are you hardwired for craziness, or are you soft wired? And what can we do to manage that? I think that's a difficult thing to explore or to discover in an interview. And sometimes we work it out later.
Right. Yes. And, and the other, we talk about the invitation of people putting forth, but not everybody is gregarious or is comfortable with being able to open up. And so therefore, if somebody wants to see you one-on-one, well, I've got a thought, but I didn't want to bring it to the table. That's just not their forte. But maybe they want to write an idea down. And again, that comes down to the leadership to recognize the person. Well, this person isn't verbal. This person's going to take everything in and maybe have an idea later. My door is open.
Mm.
No idea is too crazy. When you're ready, come in and present it, or drop me something off, a draft or whatever, because
Mm.
very often you have the gregarious people, and others just think, well, I can't do it that way, but every voice is needed. So we've always got to create other avenues, don't we, to hear them as well in whatever way we can.
That's absolutely right. And that again is the service mentality of the leader, is to understand what are your preferences of your people. I was having a great conversation yesterday with Colin Ellis, who wrote the book Culture Fix. And he was talking about that, it's like, find out how your people like to be communicated with. Is it
Yeah,
text? Is it phone
yeah,
call?
yeah.
And you adjust your style based on what their preferences are, because as a leader, you need to be in service to the people that you're leading. And I think being curious about that and wanting to discover that and being able to be flexible is one of the most important aspects of doing leadership well. And that doesn't exist in the command and control
No,
environment.
no, it's my way or the highway. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah, you've got to become a pretzel. My son opened up a restaurant 2 years ago. And before he opened it, I said to him, it's going to be like having twins. And then I went away for a while. And when I came back, he said, you lied. And I did. He said, it's like having triplets. And, you've got your clientele, you've got your staff, you've got your suppliers, and it's the constant management and juggling,
Mm.
of trying to keep everybody happy. Because if your
Mm.
staff aren't happy, your clientele is not going to be happy,
Mm.
the kitchen staff aren't going to be happy, the food isn't going to be good, the atmosphere is going to be bad. So it really is about, a happy workforce means happy clientele, and happy
Yeah.
clientele means more business. So it really is, do invest in your people. Invest in yourself so you can invest in your people, because then you're going to see that ripple effect of productivity going out everywhere, aren't you?
Absolutely. So there's two things I'd respond to in what you just said. One is that the capacity of the organization is limited by the capacity of the leader. And that's from Cindy Wigglesworth. And I always think that that's absolutely true. So if you want to grow your business, you need to grow yourself as the
Mhm,
leader,
mhm.
is the fundamental piece. And then I love this example of the restaurant and showcasing the interplay of the systems. Like, it's a perfect example of an interplay of systems: the customer dynamic, the supplier dynamic, and the staff dynamic, and the environment in which they find themselves, the financial one, the environmental one, the social one, all contributes to this play. And so is it like managing triplets? It's definitely lots of variables in there.
Yes, and
Yeah.
all different personality triplets too,
Oh, of
Yeah.
course.
and
I
and
don't think, go
yeah,
ahead.
I mean, management, that's really the key to everything, isn't it? Managing our emotions, managing our perspectives, managing the people around us. It all comes down to systematically learning how to manage things in a way that is honorable, respectful, invitational, and productive.
Yeah, I think that the management piece is coupled also with the curiosity piece. So
Hmm.
there's this management of the energy around all of those things, of the thinking, the being, and the doing, and being able to process that and channel that in the moment. And then the curiosity aspect of that is being able to then, at the end of the day, beginning of the day, reflect on that.
Hmm.
How did those things that I managed today, self, other systems, work? Where were the areas that could be improved on? Where are the areas that were glitchy and had some friction in them? So the idea of doing and reflection, it's an old model, the experiential model from Kolb, which is plan, do, review. And I think there's that cyclical nature of it that comes into play with the management. So the doing and exploration, the reflection and application is all incredibly important as leaders. So I think for contemporary leaders to be successful in such a dynamic context need a strong reflective practice. And I always encourage journaling for that,
Mm,
where you come with a sense of curiosity, inquiry to your experience, and so that you can grow and grow from it.
right, exactly. And I think is another huge one, which is humbling, is the ability to apologize.
Hmm.
I apologize if I've been rather gruff with you lately, or if I've been this or that, this is the stress right now, or the clock that we're under, or this or that. Um, I'm sorry if I've taken it out on you. I'm, could we all work together here so it's not so much on my shoulder? And you will find people will go, yes, yes, what can I do? How can we do this? And because that's that invitation to do it together. But, same, I think one of the big words that we don't want to use in business is vulnerability. But we're all human. And to show that vulnerable side isn't a sign of weakness. I think it's a sign of respect, because you're showing that you are also human. You also need compassion sometimes.
I think this idea of vulnerability is an interesting one. It's been showcased extensively and well by Brené Brown. And I think as a word, not necessarily as a concept, as a word, she hasn't yet managed to reinvigorate it. Well, that's not quite the right word. It still has connotations of weakness to it.
Yes.
And I think the principle behind it is sound. I think the ability to share our emotions and to admit that we haven't been our best selves is what vulnerability means. And I think rather than, and she describes that as being raw. The ability to be vulnerable is about being raw, showing your soft underbelly.
Yeah.
And that's what vulnerability is. I think there's a better articulation of that, and it's the expression of being real. And it comes back to my notion of getting the emotions out of the driver's seat and putting them in the passenger seat. Yeah. And when we're real, we can experience emotions without having them lash out and dump or be a storm driver or a water bomber over people. And you're right. If we do happen to forget that and the emotions get out of the passenger seat and back in the driver's seat and they ramshot, to sit and say, I'm sorry, I was not my best self. This is what I'd like to do to make amends if possible, is a sign of great strength and a great sign of open-heartedness and a great sign of being absolutely real. And I think when we acknowledge that we experience these emotions, and if we do let them sneak in and take over,
yes, raise their ugly head.
Yeah, and that we recognize that and apologize for that, we're setting a great tone and platform for others to be able to become real with their emotions and to know that we all have them, and we can all learn how to manage them better. I think the more that we do that, the less they do tend to take over, and the response rate and the acknowledgement becomes quicker. I was having a conversation with my husband just the other day, yesterday, in fact, and he came home tired and grumpy. He'd had a crappy day, and we were talking about this food service thing that I signed up for during the day. And he was like, why did you do that? What's the deal? And he was like, he just vented all of his angst around this topic. And I'm like, fine, we'll cancel it. So it was our version of a tiff, which is really like, okay, whatever. And as I was leaving to go to a meeting at the end of the day, he said, you look really lovely. I'm like, that's really nice. He goes, I know, I haven't been that nice. I've been tired and grumpy. So I'm sorry about that. And that little moment of connection and admission and was all that it took to mend whatever irritation was in the room. And that's taken 17 years in our relationship to get to the point where we can have those little friction points and being able to recover and have our relationship enriched in doing that. Because it would have been very easy, and I think this is what happens in a lot of relationships, both personal and professional, to have these little gripes and then they get parked under the carpet. It's like there's a little wound in there.
The fermentation that keeps growing and growing until it blows out of proportion. You don't even know what it was about in the first place. It's all these little things. And I think him saying sorry, it's a sign of respect. We all, come home and go, tell us about your bad day. Get it off your chest. But don't take it out on me, right? Get it off your chest. I say, spend your emotion so you don't become emotional. And that's something that we need to learn to do. Spend the emotion, know that it's got nothing to do with you, but they just need to get it off their chest. And now deep breath, we can go about our day. But if they don't, or we don't, and we get angst, then it's, okay, I'm sorry. Nothing to do with you. I just vented. My apologies for dumping it on you. And again, going back to that, apology is a sign of respect, isn't it? And, that sometimes that's all what somebody wants to hear is, I'm sorry. I was out of line. I'm sorry. And It means a great deal because it means they acknowledge that they did something to upset you or that was out of sorts. And really a lot of the time people just want that validation that, you know, it wasn't them, you were just taking it out on them.
Yeah. And it takes an awful lot of self-awareness to be able to do
Yeah.
that. And to say, oh, hang on a minute, I'm actually not really irritated.
Oh, we have a wobbly. Okay, are you going to come back?
I'm sorry, this is what's going on. Blah. And then
You're
we're
going to
back.
have to repeat that, love, because you froze for a moment. So
Oh, did
just,
I?
yes,
Okay.
you
Make
did. You were,
sure.
I'm going to cut that out.
Okay. Yeah, there's been lots of times in my marriage where I've been not in my best self and I've lashed out at my husband and made sort of, and then realized like, oh, it's nothing to do with him.
Mhm.
It's actually all to do with this stuff boiling over. And I think it takes a lot of self-awareness and self-reflection to realize that, because it comes back to that conversation we were saying earlier about blaming. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
you're the source of the problem, you never listen. And all of a sudden we've got the finger pointing going and we've got the foot stamping going, and we're externalizing all this angst when really it's whatever story we're telling ourselves about the incident or series of incidents that have happened up to that moment. And when we come back into that higher clarity that this is somebody we love and care about, and the incident is something outside of all of that, then we can unplug the emotion through an apology and come back down to earth and have a sensible discussion about the issue. And we may still disagree about the issue, but we don't need to come out with claws and rake at
Right.
each other.
Yeah. And I think sometimes just redirect what I used to do with my kids when they fought. I would make them hug and kiss each other, and they were girl and boy, and it was ew. And if, you know, again, if they weren't listening, you know, mum's voice was not heard, I started singing opera, and that shut them up, you know. So sometimes have somebody go and do something completely silly, you know, and out of the thing kind of has you snap out of yourself. And then, you know, you're taking yourself too seriously here. You know, are you finished now? Okay, let's get on with the day. And that's sometimes we need that, don't we? Just to kind of snap it. So, you know, it's looking at what is going to switch the channel.
That's a beautiful circuit breaker. So I think having something humorous to be a circuit breaker is really useful for that. Um, that's a really good one. Yeah, my
You
husband
don't
does
want to
that
hear me
quite
sing
well.
opera. Anything to shut mum up. And I think
Yeah.
that's sometimes, you know, that we're sweating the small stuff, we're taking ourselves too seriously, we're getting too wrapped up in the emotion, and sometimes just having that something, it's a circuit breaker that can just switch it, and then they can do something silly, and then let's all just take a breath, and
The one
then,
that
you know,
the one
revisit.
that we use in our marriage is, have you got your grumpy pants on today?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
it's like, yes, I do. And that is enough
yeah,
to snap us out of whatever,
right.
where the emotions come in with a story and they're starting to take over. It's like, oh yes, grumpy pants. We can take those grumpy pants off
Yeah,
and try again
right.
with happy pants.
And then you can do that in the workforce too. You know, maybe, you know, you find out, because humor in work is really important, isn't it? And I'm not talking about raunchy, you know, humor. I'm talking about the ability to make fun of the situation or to lighten things up. And we need to really do that now and again. And so you've really got to know your staff. This is where you really need to invest in your staff, of knowing who they are. Who is your team? How can you approach something? Because you don't want to tell a joke and it upset someone else, but how can you make light of a situation again to kind of just bring everybody back to that breath, have a good laugh and go, okay, you know, now let's get back to really what the problem is. And that's a technique again that some people may have naturally and some people have to learn.
Oh, I agree with that. I think, yeah, some people are really good at knowing where the tension is and
Yeah.
just having a wise crack to be able to crack it open. And then some others don't. They simmer in the tension and they haven't learned awareness of that. But it's
Yeah.
definitely a skill that you can learn. It's like, okay, let's lighten this up a little. And I think becoming sensitive to energy patterns and flow and dynamics in a room is, again, a really important people stuff skill that leaders can develop.
You know, we've mentioned, or you've mentioned energy all the way through that, and we've got to realize something. Energy is everything. Through our blood stream, the oxygen, the flow of everything that runs through us is energy. Everything around us is energy. Everything is measurable in frequency and hertz. When we talk about vibrations, it's all energy. And in which we set the tone of something is an energy. And so the energy that we bring to the table in everything we do in our lives is the energy that's going to be, you know, received and responded to. So, you know, if we are in a bad space, or you know, cancel the meeting or go and do something to change your energy signature, but don't go and bring that negative energy to the table, because that energy really will set the way the flow is going to go, isn't it? Because energy is our life source, it's our life chi, it's everything.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it takes, again, a bit of awareness to work that out. And when I was going through cancer, I read a lot of books on mind-body connection
Mm-hmm.
and energy-based things, because I was really wanted to be invested in my own healing. And this idea of becoming aware of where the energy patterns are around us is, it was liberating, actually, to
Yes.
think about that. And that a sense of interconnectedness is quite astounding. And it's interesting. I've been reading a couple of pieces around astronauts and their experiences in space, and there's an enormous amount of them who had these extraordinary experiences. It's an extraordinary experience being out
Yes.
in space, but they had this overwhelming sense of universal connection. So basically, an enlightenment experience is where
Mm-hmm.
they they had the sense that they realized, as they were sitting there floating in space, that they're stardust, the ship is stardust, the moon and the earth is all stardust. We're all part of the same thing. And the sense of energy
Mm-hmm.
permeating everything was completely overwhelming. And each astronaut has returned to Earth with a completely different perspective. And I wrote about this recently this week on my blog about this. How do we do that? Not all of us will have a chance to go into
Mm-hmm.
space and have that interconnection. And when we're having an argument with our child or with a colleague, we can forget that we're all
Yes.
stardust and we're all
Yes.
interconnected, you know, because we've got these very visceral issues. And yet, if we can latch onto that and remain tethered to that little concept, it's actually a massive concept,
Mm-hmm.
remain tethered to that concept that we are all essentially energy, then the stories about our human narrative dissolve a little bit, and we can play more lightly in the moment, and we
Yes.
could bring a different kind of energy to the discussion, to the experience. And we can be more of a leader in guiding the energy, as opposed to a director of it or a suppressor of it.
Mm.
And I love the fact that you pointed that out, that we're all energy, and it's such a useful frame for us to just
Mm-hmm.
ease a little bit. So create that space and pause and allow, invite for
Mm-hmm.
inspiration, as you say.
Well, the energy isn't just, you know, on the top of our shoulders. You know, this is the CPU. You know, this is the computer and the programming. And if we don't invite kind of the soul, the heart, and the spirit into the equation, we are only firing on one cylinder. So, you know, the whole of us is what our energy is, and it's how to manage and be productive in our energy by utilizing the whole of us and then immersing it along with nature and cosmos. And on a side note, a brilliant show on the astronauts and what they've learned about the Earth from space. And as you said, their journey is One Strange Rock on Netflix.
Oh yeah.
Narrated by Will Smith. It's a 10-part series. It is utterly beautiful. And again, it puts life into perspective. While we are so busy bitching about something down here on Earth, when you see things from above and you see really how small we are, and what a short lifespan we have,
Mm,
um, why are we wasting it?
mm,
You know, why are we wasting it on you know, negative thoughts or retaliation or grumpiness or this or that, when there is so much creativity lying within us ready to be spent? You
mm,
know, this instrument of ours needs to be played. We need to find our orchestra. We need to create that symphony. And if we could just get on with that, we would really see all of the world's problems being resolved, because we've got
mm,
to remember we're the ones that created them in the first place.
mm,
So we
mm,
actually have the ability to resolve them, but it means us cohesively, collaboratively, and harmoniously bring our energies together in a symphony that really ripples and resonates out as an invitation to everyone else. So I'm really glad you're doing the work that you're doing, because people stuff is what gets in the way of everything. You know, we are absolutely awesome creatures. We have so much creativity and ability, but we are our own worst enemy. And that comes from past conditioning or expectation or ego or just, old systems that aren't working. And we really need to have to be willing to adapt, adjust, and grow and go with the flow, because what worked yesterday doesn't work today, and it won't work tomorrow. So whether you're the leader or whether you are an entrepreneur, whoever you are out there that's needing that help, to kind of get it all in alignment, get all that energy in alignment so that you can do the people stuff well, because unless you're a hermit, you're going to be interacting with people. And so you need to get your people stuff down so that your reaction and interaction with people is one that is pleasing for everybody. So get hold of you. So how do they get hold of you?
Well, you can find me on my website at zoerouth.com. That's ZOEROUTH.com. LinkedIn is a great place to reach out as well. So Zoe Routh, or Zoe Herbert Routh is my maiden name. And I publish daily on LinkedIn, and I have a blog and a podcast as well. So you can find between those two sites, you'll get everything you need to connect with me.
And your books are also found on your sites. Can you give us the title of your books?
Yes, here they are right here. My first three, here we go. Composure, How Centered Leaders Make the Biggest Impact. That was book number 1. Moments, Leadership Leadership When It Matters Most.
Mm-hmm.
That was book number 2. Book number 3 is Loyalty. Stop Unwanted. I know, I love the ship on it,
Mm-hmm.
Stop unwanted staff turnover, boost engagement, and create lifelong advocates. My 4th book, People Stuff, I'm currently writing, and it will be out in May 2020. So that they're all available on my website or at Amazon. So you can buy the ebook or the hard copy book through those major platforms.
And I assume that the people that you interview on the podcast are people in the same type of line of work, that are people.
Yeah, so the people that I interview on my podcast are either experts in people stuff in their respective fields. So lately I've done a lot of interviews around culture,
Mm-hmm.
around mindset, around diversity and inclusion. So there's a series of them. And the other people I interview are leaders in the field. So from the trenches type of interview.
Right.
So how are they living and breathing and working leadership in their different contexts?
Right. So the lesson continues. Right?
That's right. Oh, yeah. I mean, I do the podcast because I learned so much from it.
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. After 7.5 years of doing this, it's been my best therapy ever. Yes.
Fantastic.
And the programs you do, are they a particular length, or are they, do you have different sizes for different people?
Yes. They do go through, it depends on the individual and the organization. The Your Stuff program is a 12-month one. Which is for individual leaders. The Team Stuff program is over a series of months, probably 3 to 6 months. The Leadership Stuff program, again, similar, can go, well, it's probably best done 6 to 12 months, that one. And then my group, the other program I didn't mention is my Amplifiers program, where individuals can come and join in as a group of leaders. So leaders from all sorts of different sectors, we meet once a quarter and do a deep dive on one of the leadership stuff aspects and share insights and so on. So there's that one, there's a 12-month program that's ongoing that people can join into there.
And, this is something I want to point out to people, 6 months, 12 months. I know we're in a society today, well, I just want to download an app, plug it in. It doesn't work that way. Change happens slowly and systematically. To undo old programming, you have to insert new programming, and it has to be repetitive and constantly, advanced forward. And as human beings, it generally does take us a good 6 months before, that change is set into place, and that 12-month that really then introduces, the real new patterning of what you're doing. And obviously you're giving support along the line there as well. So it's something that again, going back to what I said earlier, we need to invest in ourselves so that we can be better investors in our people. So at first it has to start with ourselves. And if you're not willing to put that time in, then you're not going to get the results you want. So there are no quick fixes, but it's a willingness to take the journey, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a good starting point is getting one of the books.
Mm-hmm.
And because they can be your constant companion, and you can do little bite-sized chunks of development and bit by bit through the books. They're designed that way. They're designed as handbooks for folks for reflection.
Right. And of course the podcast things as well. And then you
That's
get to a point and you go, this is the avenue I need help in. Now I can reach out to Zoe because I really know where I need the help, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's like, now I'm ready.
Yes. And that's, again, you can't help those who are unwilling to help themselves. So if you are wanting to do something, you've got to be willing to participate in it, be interactive in it, because if not, if you don't turn up, you're not going to get anything out of it. So this is when you're ready, willing, and able. And when you are, Zoe is there, ready, willing, and able to help you through the process. And your site again.
Thank you so much.
Oh, pleasure. This has been delightful. We've covered a lot of subjects here today. So It doesn't matter whether you're in business or not. This is something that, we're leaders in our own lives. It's something we can apply to our own lives and be more aware, because we go through life unaware, and just be more aware of how we're putting ourselves out. And if we're getting negativity back, well, what are you putting out? And how could you be a better leader and a better inviter in your own life? So these are good lessons for everybody. So it's Zoe Routh, ROUTH.com. And you're in Australia. You primarily work with people in Australia?
Yes, so I'm a Canadian originally, and I live in Australia now. So my main client group when I do face-to-face work is in Australia. I do travel for speaking engagements though. So happy to travel anywhere in the world for an opportunity to speak.
Excellent, wonderful. And so if you're in Australia, folks, please just get out there, and we all need the help. There's no shame in asking for help. There's no shame in saying, I'm stuck here. Or, I know I can be more. I know I could do more. I know this is my problem. I have an issue with this and that. This is what, other people are there for. This is what the teamwork. She is part of your team to help you through it. So, there's no stigma in asking for help, folks. This is where the courage comes in, to get your strength. Be courageous, ask for the help. And once you've gone through the other end, you really will like who you've become. So thank you so much, Zoe, for being with us here today. And to everyone else, please, ZoeRouth.com, reach out to her, listen to some of her podcasts, read her book, and have a chat with her, see if she's a fit with you, because we all would like everyone to put their best foot forward. Until next time, folks, bye for now.
We hope that you enjoyed the show. To find many more shows of inspiration, please go to selfdiscoverymedia.com podcasts, and you will see an array of shows to choose from. Please do visit our www.discoveringcommunities.org and see what else that we have in store for you. Do enjoy our next show.